we would be in a pickle. Without the Navy, we would be in a pickle. And without the Marines, we would be in a pickle. And the Coast Guards. But you know what? They called the infantry the queen of the battle. Because who had to go in and clean them out? The Air Corps would soften them up with bombs, and the Navy would get us there to the shores where we were to land. But it was the infantry that had to go in and dig them out of the holes. And that's what I did. But anyway, I went into service in 1942. I was married, had a little girl. She was 3 months old when I went into service. Sandra Jean. And we went into Camp Atterbury, Indiana. We formed up this division, the 83rd Infantry Division, and we practiced everything that we could practice. But what we mostly practiced and learned was discipline. And I can't install in your minds more than the discipline that is necessary in your life as you grow up. You're 7th graders, right? You're what? 12? Huh?
12 and 13.
12 and 13. I'm 90. So you got a few years ahead of you. But discipline is so important. In the Army, they first taught us to stand at attention, to turn left, turn right, forward march, halt, so on. You had to obey orders. And you have to do it today. That man back there is your teacher. You have to obey him. And when he says, Brian, was it? Jerry? When he calls on you, what do you say? Okay. No. You know what you answer him? Yes, sir. When you go home tonight, and your mother and dad say something to you about hanging up your clothes, get rid of them, clean up your room, and you say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, you know what? They'll faint. Believe me. I'm only saying that you've got to say it every day and you've got to do it. That's discipline. And then the other thing that's so important. In the United States, we have what we call...
Flag.
There it is. The American flag. And as I have talked with Mr. Mitchell many times, the Pledge of Allegiance is so important because you know what pledge means? You know what it means? I promise. I pledge. I promise. Allegiance means that I will honor and be with and love that flag. And that's what we did back in 1940 and 42 and 44 and 45. And even today, for these men that are serving in Iraq and other countries, they have to love the flag. Because we're not in it just for the fun of it. We're in it for our country. If we had not been as pushy as we were when we made the D-Day landings, the Germans almost pushed us off. And we'd be speaking Heil Hitler today. It was that close, kids, that we darn near didn't make it. So keep that in mind, that when you undergo a mission, that you follow it through. And as I say, we left Camp Atterbury. We went to camp in Kentucky. We did maneuvers, practiced crawling on the ground, how to eat, how to keep distance between each other. You never were supposed to gang up. And so that the enemy couldn't find and set. If the enemy sent a shell over and it exploded, it would only kill maybe one person instead of a whole bunch congregating in a group. So we were taught, stay separate, be separate. I went across the Atlantic on a largest convoy that ever went across the ocean. And the Germans had one U-boat in the Atlantic, and we lost one merchant ship. That was all. And there was hundreds and hundreds of ships. And our division was on a huge ocean liner, and we did communion on Easter of 1944. And we were down where the swimming pool once was, is where the chaplains had communion. Landed in England, went to Wrexham, Wales in April and May, and then one day, June 6th, came along, and there were hundreds and thousands of airplanes, B-17s, B-24s, P-51s, Mustang. Oh, you can't imagine the sky that was covered with planes. Clear up in North England, and they were all forming up, ready for this big invasion that started at 6 o'clock or 6:30 in the morning of June 6th. Well, the weather happened to be good that day, and General Eisenhower made the decision, because on the 5th it was so bad that they couldn't, it was raining and everything, and on June 6th the weatherman said, it'll be nice. And it was. It calmed down, and thousands of boats headed out across the channel over to France. And I was on a ship going up and down the channel. We couldn't land the next days because it was so rough. The waves were huge. And even our landing craft, as they were going in on those days, were swamped. And many men died from that and drowned. But I remember on that big old ship, there was a ladder, rope ladder over the side, and there was landing craft infantry that down below us. And they would come up and down on the waves like that. And so as we came down the rope ladder, we had to wait until that craft came up, and then we'd drop quick into the boat. When we went in, I was able to walk in on shore. And you know, they told us, all right, fellas, walk right up that line. There's yellow tape there. Don't cross them. But we had a couple of smarties that didn't know discipline. And they jumped over that yellow line. Well, it was mines in there, and it blew them up. That was my first taste of seeing somebody die. My first taste was, as we landed, was the dead people, Americans, that were still in the water. Arms off, heads off, legs gone. And let me tell you, it wasn't enervating, it didn't bolster me up, but because we had discipline, we bypassed that and went ahead. Went up that hill, bivouacked, got ready for a big attack, July 4th, and there was over 300 or 400 artillery pieces that were different divisions sent guns, shells over to soften up the Germans. Well, we went down to this area, and the Germans had dug out trenches so that it was anti-tank ditches. They were 6-7 foot deep. And we went over in there, and unbeknownst, they had flooded the ditch the day before, and we were up against this hedgerow, and we were in water from 5 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock that night in the water. And we would stick our machine guns over the top of the hedgerow and fire through that. And the Germans would throw over their grenades, which were potato mashers. I don't know whether you've ever seen them, but they're about this long with a handle. And they'd throw them over, and we would catch those and throw them back. But that's what we did. And our grenades are one where you pull a pin, and the handle will go ping, and you hold it for 2 seconds. Then throw it, and then in 3 seconds it explodes. If you hold it too long, of course you're gone too. But we throw that over, and they couldn't throw it back. So our shelling didn't do too good on softening up those guys. And they finally waved a white flag and said, give us penicillin, we will give you our wounded and dead. So they backed ambulances down this little roadway, and they loaded all these fellows on there and took them out. And our army put it down on a smoke screen, and we withdrew. And when I withdrew, I was running along on what I thought was dry land, and I landed in this ditch. Went clear to the bottom, had a rifle over my back, a helmet, and my pack, and of course fully dressed. I went right to the bottom and I pushed myself back up, and I remember getting out of there and going back to our bivouac area and drying out. And then on the 10th of July, we had some new equipment because we had taken our old guns, our old machine guns, and field stripped them, which means take every part that is possible, and we pushed it down into the mud and destroyed it. That was our orders, because they didn't want us coming back across that land and having the Germans shoot us, and they would capture the weapons. So we put them down in the mud and destroyed them. Well, in between the 4th of July and the 10th of July, we had a new gun, which was, well, new to us, was a .30 caliber lightweight machine gun, which the gunner has a asbestos glove, and he holds the barrel like this, and then he can fire, as he's sitting leaning down, he can fire that. And if that barrel gets so hot, it goes low red, as red as this book, just red hot. So you'd have this asbestos glove. Well, on the 10th of July, my gunner was killed. And so I took over the gun, and I was firing it. And the Germans had an 88 millimeter gun, a weapon. It was one of the greatest weapons to this day. And they could lob it this way, they could go up in the air with it, and they could shoot any which way, and they used to bracket. They would drop a shell here, and they'd drop one here, and then they would drop one here. Well, I happened to be here, and I felt something in my arm. I thought it was a bee sting. I didn't know what it was, and it stung me right here in the arm. And I felt something real warm here, and I pulled my shirt out, and it was all blood. And I said, uh-oh, I've been hit. And I called the medic, and the medic came. He said, oh, he said, Sergeant, he said, you're a lung, you've been hit in the lung. And he said, we got to get a litter up here. That meant 2 or 3 men carried a litter. And I said, no, I'll walk back to the aid station, which I did. We got back to the aid station, and they got me into an ambulance, and a tank came up and dropped a tanker off. He'd lost his foot, his right foot. I don't know how it happened. But anyway, they put him in the litter above me, and they had these 2 litters here, and they were Dodge ambulances with a big red cross on each side. And a German tank came in with an 88 gun, shell, and went right over the top of our ambulance and landed in our aid station. I don't know how many men were killed or wounded. It just blew the thing up. And the driver said, let's get out of here. And he slammed the doors. We took off down the road. And he says, hang on back there. He said, there's a log across the road. And so we got up to that spot. He went over the log, and this tanker's foot flopped out. And he had plasma, and it was kind of loose, dripping. And I remember I reached up and pushed his foot back into his litter. He says, get that blanket off of my foot. Well, you know, when you lose any part of a body, leg, arm, fingers, or anything, your nerves always say that they're still there. That's tantamount. And so he thought his foot was still on. He didn't know it was gone. But anyway, as we were going across that log, a German shot right through the Red Cross. It hit that wire up there, and the wire went like that in the top of the ambulance. Why I remember those things? They seem so little, but they were important as to what was going on. Well, anyway, back to the hospital, and they sutured my arm that day and then sent me back to England. But you know, in between July 4th and July 10th, I was laying in those foxholes. The Germans were shelling at night, and our guys were scared. We were all scared. And I had my foxhole there, and 2 of my men jumped over out of their foxhole and came over and got on top of me. And all night long, the 3 of us were in that foxhole. You know what a foxhole is? Or a slit trench. It's just dug in the ground, maybe that deep, the length of your body, and about the width of your body. And you would put yourself in that, and because when the shell would land, the fragments would go this way. And unless you had a direct hit, you were pretty safe from shrapnel. Well, anyway, during those nights, I made a commitment to God, and I said, God, if you get me out of this, I will serve you. Now, I had known God and had gone to church many times, But it wasn't until the war, until that time, that God became real to me. And I said, God, I will serve you. Well, I got out of service. After all, this was just a little wound. It got me back to England. I went into physical therapy, and we were the first forerunner of the therapy today. But we established out of 18,000 men that went through our hospital, 15,000 went back to full duty. So we were doing a good job. But anyway, I came home, and I didn't serve God. And it wasn't until 1955, my daughter was playing up the street with a neighbor boy, and she jumped off of a porch railing. Maybe it was about this high, and she broke her leg. And I went up to get her, and she was crying as I was carrying her home. She was 12 years old, just about your age. And she was crying, and I said, Sandy, what's the matter? And she said, I disobeyed you. Because I had told her, never jump off of anything more than this high. Well, she did it. Well, consequently, it caused a brain tumor in her head, and it was fibroid, and it grew, and she lived 1 year from that date. And she died when she was 14 years old. And God told me, see, you promised me, and you didn't keep your promise. Now I've taken your flower home. I didn't blame God. I blamed me. But you know what? God was so good, because out of that death of my daughter, it was like driving a stone into a pond. The rings went out and out and out, and each one of those rings was somebody saved. And I can't begin to tell you how many people were saved because my daughter died. So I praise the Lord for that. So that taught me a whole lot. And it wasn't until I realized what had happened that it was His will, or what it meant to be for Him. This is what I looked like when I graduated from school. I had hair. And then when I was in service, this is what I looked like in my uniform.
Sure.
So that was 3 years later. And I wanted to show you those things and what it really meant in my life to be a veteran. And you people, young people, should really honor any veteran. A veteran can be a school teacher. It can be a headmaster. It can be a secretary in buildings. It can be a soldier. It can be a policeman. It can be anything. But a veteran is one that you should always remember has done a service for someone or his country or some organization. So, honoring the veterans, honoring the flag, that when the United States flag goes by in a parade, what do? Stand at attention and put your hand over your heart. And when you recite the Pledge of Allegiance, your hand goes over your heart. That means that I am honoring with my soul and my love for the flag. That's important. Okay.